Hi, we're at Percona Live 2022, and we're with another long-time familiar face in the MySQL community. Alkin, you've been around and done so many things, and you've written books, you've written code, you're talking this week, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So what are you doing now?
All right. First of all, hello, and thank you for welcoming me. We have a few new updates. So one of them is the book. The book is MySQL Cookbook 4th edition. Is on the pre-production stage. Hopefully, it's in the pre-release. Also, hopefully coming up soon. We'll have the book ready probably in the next conference. Hopefully, that's the good news. That took about like 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears. So I can tell you that.
The folks like James Patterson pump out a book every 6 weeks, kind of make.
I don't know, but I have to mention that the big applause and the credit goes to Sweated. So my call. Without her, that would be truly impossible.
And to be clear, this is not a guide for MySQL VBAs or SREs actually trying to feed themselves. This is scripts and helpful queries to do stuff.
Yes, hundreds of recipes, like 950 something plus pages and 24 chapters. So it's a lot of stuff goes in. It will hopefully help developers, DBAs, people want to learn some stuff. And also, like, you'll be able to go search stuff. How do you do this? And find a solution. Common problem and solutions.
Yeah, one of the things about writing a book is you kind of like teaching. It teaches you what you don't really know.
Well,
halfway through a sentence ago.
One must admit that I learned a ton, and some of the things that you thought you knew, you didn't. So it's good.
I have a book I've halfway written for the past 2 years on indexes, and things that used to be true about indexes are no longer true. So it's kind of like, okay, when did this change? So I can write in the market there. You go off that tangent.
That was one of the reasons that actually this book came out in the 4th edition, that there were a lot of changes, updates to the MySQL ecosystem, including MySQL 8. So we converted a bunch of old stuff into the new system.
And what's your favorite recipe?
My favorite recipe, I come from I'm not a developer, so I come from dev, I come from ops, and so those chapters that I enjoyed, kind of reiterating over, but there were some really good stuff that I learned about the strings and date time, the updates, a lot of stuff. There's many details into that, so it was good to go over them, because unless you use it, you don't really know all the details.
One of the things they don't teach you in college is that when you get out of the classroom, there are actually books where you go look up the stuff, or online look the stuff, so you don't try to memorize everything.
Exactly.
And daytime conversions, time zones is one of those things that please don't memorize. Just look it up so you get it.
Look it up. Take a look at the examples and then apply what you're trying to actually accomplish. So it'll be most up to date and efficient also.
Cool.
And that's about it. And the other thing is, I have some news that I've joined early startup called ChistaDATA. We're focusing on ClickHouse and services. And this is going to be an exciting adventure for me. So I will be taking over the global services and building team, and then we'll be in the ecosystem again.
Which means you're looking for resumes.
Yes, I didn't want to say that, but I'm hiring. So we are hiring on also different roles, like these type of companies will require not only EBAs, but we'll need solution engineers, sales and other executives.
Cool. So if you're a marketing droid or a support person, please let them know.
Yes.
For those who aren't familiar with ClickHouse, it's a columnar storage engine?
Yes, okay, let's go that real quick, because ClickHouse is gaining more popularity in the recent years. It's one of the open source solutions that to do analytics and well, it's a large spectrum of data warehousing, BI, CDC, but it's focused on the columnar store, so it's kind of different than MySQL and the OLTP data stores, and it's got features targeted on that. The workload type is mostly for writing in large data sets and then reading and aggregating the result off of it as fast as possible. And it provides charting, replica set, and a compression along with it, so it's pretty efficient, and so it will be coming up more and more as a solution for who uses the other open source open source database solutions that will be used. So we are actually excited to be in this ecosystem. In terms of data needs to come from the source data still needs to come from somewhere, and that database that MySQL, Postgres, or MongoDB. generally speaking.
And column stores are amazingly fast for analytics because they go vertically down the data instead of across.
Yeah, it's a little
Crazy. Yeah.
for someone who worked on non-column store or the traditional online transactional database where we actually read row by row and we have columns, and our always recommendation not to have too many columns and just select the columns that you need. Those don't apply for these systems. They're like large denormalized data sets, and then they're stored by column, and then you can actually select and aggregate on them, which is amazing fast.
You break up all the columns into various extents and chart those out.
Exactly. Cool. So yeah, I will have some demos and probably tutorials in coming conferences. So we're going to plan on teaching more about how that works.
So we're going to trust for you to be at over 2023 Percona Live in the EMEA and the US.
Yes, hopefully. Yes.
Anything else you want to promote or talk about? Or?
Well, I also want to thank everyone making this Percona Live possible, because we're coming off of a pandemic, and it was more of a steep down, but it's going to take a time to ramp up to the old days. And please come back on the next one. Send talks, send likes, retweets, and share, and then come be part of it. So I want to thank everyone who made this conference possible.
Well, one of the great things about a show like this, besides the sessions and all that, is the hallway track where I get to meet people like you and find out all these various facets of things I have absolutely no knowledge about. That's why you want to be on the line.
Absolutely. They're very valuable people that you don't get to see in day-to-day, especially people working remotely. So this is a chance to come and meet with them and then, pick their ideas about the solutions, challenges that they actually face. So it's amazing time and it's got a good return on investment coming over here.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Hi, we're Percona Live 2022. I am doing a podcast. My name is Dave Stokes. I'm on the Percona community team. Right now, I'm sitting with the regal Matt Lord, who, if you're an old-time MySQLer, it's one of those, whatever happened to Matt Lord? And I know you went off to Mongo, and then you went off to other places, and now you're at Planet Scale. So, what are you doing at Planet Scale, and why is it exciting?
Yeah, so as you noted, I've been in MySQL forever, and I'm a big, so you might guess I'm a big fan of databases. And so what I'm really doing at Planet Scale is kind of helping long-time MySQL users, or maybe in some cases not necessarily a long time, but helping them deal with their own success, basically. It's a good problem to have. Scaling problems are good problems to have because it means you're finding some success and getting it out of users. So basically, once they get to that point where they're seeing that point on the horizon where they're not going to be able to scale vertically anymore, because the easiest thing to do as well is use a bigger machine, bigger physical hardware, bigger VM, faster storage. That's kind of the natural progression. But at some point, you reach the case where you're too successful to run your business off of a single database server, and so then you need to start partitioning or sharding your data and kind of scaling up your database infrastructure from there. And that's really where we're focusing on a Planet Scale. I work specifically on Vitesse, which is the underlying technology that really supports the Planet Scale serverless database that the Planet Scale offers. And I'm helping people kind of get into Vitesse, and then once they're into Vitesse, continue to scale up from there. So let's say you start off with 2 shards, 4, and 8. So I'm working on a V replication that facilitates getting into Vitesse, resharding, so sharding, resharding your data, kind of various sorts of complex data flows that I'll be talking about actually.
Now, do you start sharding depending on how big your data is, or the response time, or what comes to the point of the road and you say, okay, I have to shard?
I think that depends. It differs for certain people. For some people, it could simply be just a matter of size. It could be that they're struggling, let's say just backing up the database instance, for example. It's become several terabytes in size. And certain things like that may just become more challenging. Or it could just be the amount of memory. Maybe maybe their data set size is a terabyte. They're fine with that, but their hot data set size, what they need to have in memory for reasonable performance, is getting too large for what even the largest, VM that you might get from Amazon or even machine you might get from one of the vendors if you're on-prem will support. In other cases, it could be like you said, it could just be that for whatever reasons, I think the amount of requests that they're getting just can't be handled within their kind of defined SLOs anymore. They can see that trend line going towards that, and then that's just another case where, okay, how do we split this traffic and the handling of these user queries out so that we can stay within perpetually? So obviously the ideal is that you're able to scale linearly, so that as you become more and more successful, your application and your service is able to handle that load with 5 users, and continue to do that just as well with 5 billion.
So if I'm a data center manager, or what used to be a data center manager, I have everything out now in the cloud, and I start getting that little uneasy feeling in my stomach that, gee, maybe I should start looking into splitting things up. How long is the process from, oh my goodness, I should look into this, to being able to?
So that's actually a fairly common case with the Planetscale service. So while I work on Vitesse, and you can certainly use Vitesse on-prem, a lot of big names do, from GitHub to Slack, many others. Planetscale just makes all of that easy. So let's say you have, you just want to test it out even. Like maybe you haven't made a commit because you don't feel that comfortable yet with Planetscale and or Vitesse, but you want to try it out. So there's a database import feature which leverages Vitesse B replication, which I'll be talking about under the hood. But what it does is it will set up a tablet, which is kind of a sidecar that manages MySQL tabs. But they'll be just sitting in front of that, so that basically that RDS or Aurora instance, for example, can be treated as if it was part of a Vitesse cluster. And then you can import that directly into Planetscale. So a few mouse clicks, and you can have your data into Planetscale relatively quickly. Obviously, if you've got 200 gigabytes, it takes a little longer than if you have 2 gigabytes. But it actually does happen quite quickly because of the optimizations that happen through V replication, all the batching and pipelining. So pretty quickly, with a few mouse clicks, you can be up. And the free tier with Planetscale is also quite generous. So it's pretty easy to actually just kick the tires and see, like, is this really feasible for us? And you can run it for as long as you want alongside, so your application will continue to use the Aurora instance, and you have this replication stream happening, so your data is being kept up to date in Planetscale. Whenever you feel comfortable, you can kind of cut over. And if you realize, you know what, for one reason or another, there's something else we're going to have to address, you can come back over, and you still have. But you can do all of that live without, there are a couple seconds of downtime for basically the amount of time it takes to switch all of your user traffic over. But minimal downtime, no data loss, you can switch back and forth.
Anything we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
No, other than it's just great to be back in person. Great to see so many people from the MySQL community. It's I feel like I've spent my entire adult life, not quite, but a majority of it in the MySQL community, so it's great to be back here.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Matt Lord for Planetscale.
Thank you.
Hey, we're back at Percona Live 2022, and we're here with a familiar face in the MySQL community and the open source community, and you've been at Percona Live a gazillion times. It's Ovais, Tariq.
It's great to be here, Dave, and yes, been at Percona Live numerous times, and really glad to be back here in person after the pandemic. I've been waiting for a long time now. I'm waiting to meet the community here.
Yeah, but the big news, heck, Percona Live. You
Yeah. I just started it December last year, and I've been working with databases for a long time and trying to solve the problem related to how to improve the developer experience. I was doing that at Uber around 6 years there, and I thought that we can take a better approach to making a more developer-friendly database than what we see. As compared to the traditional architecture. In a traditional architecture, there's a focus on the developers having to stitch multiple products together. Right? There's that infrastructure component, and we look at where cloud computing is going and where developer experience is going. It's going more towards more abstracted form of infrastructure. The developer can focus more on the product. Right? So that was the driving force behind starting Tigris and building a developer-friendly database, which is zero ops, scalable, and developer doesn't really have to worry about the infrastructure, and the platform will be able to support different data access patterns, such as real-time search, real-time streaming, transactions, familiar MongoDB style document model, and so that the developer can actually focus on building the product rather than thinking about the infrastructure.
Well, traditionally, these are programmers that have to suffer for structured query language, which is a descriptive language, totally different from what they're used to, or they use an ORM.
Yes.
And then they wonder why the performance isn't that great with either of them, because they're not taught to write proper SQL and ORM.
Yeah.
How is Tigris different?
Well, actually, in some forms it's similar to the descriptive form or the declarative way of a SQL, but in other forms it's different. So I think that one of the challenges that I've seen developers having with SQL is that when they're writing an application, they are thinking more in terms of objects and classes, which is similar to how a document modeling would look like. But then when they start thinking about a normalized table, then they need to think about it completely differently and have to translate to a different model. And it's not easy most of the times, and that's where we see issues with not having proper schema modeling and not being able to write efficient queries. So the approach we are taking is more of a document oriented approach, so that maps one-on-one with how people are writing code. So you don't need your ORM if you're using Tigris. But what we are taking from the relational side is that you still have to define a schema. So you cannot stuff anything in the database and expect that everything is going to work, because even when you're writing an application and you think that I don't need a schema, the application still has to have a structure, right? So what we are saying is that you get the schema flexibility, you offer document model, but you still have to define a schema, you still have to define a structure. And then when I mentioned that we are borrowing from the declarative style of SQL, the way we are borrowing it is that when you think about SQL, you essentially declare what you want. It's not you don't have to define how do I want to access the data, right? You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to write any data pipelines essentially, and that we are taking the same declarative approach. And I would say that we are inspired by MySQL, because when you are using MySQL, you declare that this is how my table should look like. This is you declare what type of secondary indexes you need, and you declare what type of full text search index you need, right? And we are taking the same approach to a distributed platform. Everything is going to be driven through data models. So the developer would declare data model. They would say that we want a full text search index, we want a global index, we want streaming, and then we would orchestrate all of that for them transparently. So that's where I feel that we are still following the SQL approach of declaring what your intention is and not being forced to write a whole infrastructure there.
And you do all the distributing with Tigris.
Yeah.
And how distributed can I get?
Well, it's super scalable from day one. It's a sharded system from day one. It can scale. It will be able to scale petabytes of data. And one of the reasons I'm confident about that is at the core we are using Foundation DB, and Foundation DB has been running at pretty large scale at companies like Apple, Snowflake. It's one of the core components of their data architecture. So it's a proven, battle tested key value store, and we are using that as a building block.
Very, very cool. And how do we find out more? What's the URL? How do we get a hold of you? Where does someone who's seen this stuff goes, oh my God, where do they go?
They go to tigris.dev, TIGRIS.dev.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best of luck. And is there anything else you want to expound about at the last minute, something we haven't touched, or just something you want to say to the 5 or 6 people who actually see this when it's finally out?
I'm sure there are going to be much more people. You're very popular, so I'm glad that I'm actually here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And we are building an open source product. It's all about the community.
And folks, next year we're having 2 Percona Live, and I'm hoping Tigris CBD is going to be the company to employ. We do them when they're just starting out.
Yeah, exactly. And we will hopefully have good talks. And both of the Percona Live.
Very cool.
Look forward to that.
Well, thank you, sir. Hi, we're at Percona Live 2022 with Jakob, and I don't want to butcher that.
Lorberblatt.
That must have been fun when you were a little kid learning to write on the spell. My mom's name was Veronica Rose McDermott. She used to have to do all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it never fits in the blanks.
Never gets that way. So you always have a little extra squares for that. You are working for Pythian, and you are the team lead.
Yes.
And Pythian's been around the database world forever and ever. I remember the days when Paul Raleigh was out there. So what's new with Pythian? What are you folks doing, and how's things going?
Things are continuing to go well. We're continuing to expand the databases that we support. Long before my day, when Paul Valet started it was Oracle, and then continued to grow into additional databases, SQL Server, open source databases, which is forever. We currently officially support MySQL, Mongo, Postgres, and Cassandra.
Cool. I don't deal a lot with Cassandra, and I'm hoping that that's still a growing market out there. You're based all over the world.
Yeah.
You've been around forever. And what is a typical customer like when you get a
Typical customer. They come in all shapes and sizes. Well, they're getting to be a little larger overall, but some of them are still fairly small. So a lot of the typical needs that come in are for difficult upgrades, possibly lagging versions as far back as 4, and trying to get into a current version. Existing application loads that are just tricky to work with, or integrating something like high availability, or better disaster recovery instead. Cloud migrations.
Cool. So you do everything from the small businesses to the big businesses.
Yeah, essentially.
How has the cloud business for you folks been the last 5 years? I grew up in an era where you actually had a device that you could go over. How much of your business roughly has moved into the cloud in the past little while?
As far as existing business moving to the cloud, I would say that's a smaller percentage than new business coming in that's to be moved to the cloud or recently to the cloud and trying to take better advantage of the resources available there. I'd say that in the database world, that lift and shift is still the predominant method of moving to the cloud. That first, it's just taking a physical server and moving it into a VM and out in the cloud. It's all just a compute instance, easy move, and then moving on to more automation and being able to leverage the cloud platform itself. There's a couple of easy grabs, volume snapshotting and other things for backup are much faster and easier. That also enables provisioning of new MySQL replicas much more quickly and more autonomously than was possible before.
I'm amazed at the amount of things have changed. As I mentioned, other things. I grew up in an age where if you wanted to increase your hardware, you put in a budget request, waited for the budget to be approved, and then you had to get a purchase order approved, and so much later it would show up on the loading dock. The rapid change that's going on. It's amazing to me how many people can actually keep on track of stuff. And that's why there's Perconas and Pythians where we have the folks that can say, yeah, we know you have these sticking points, let's help you. Do you have any advice for some company that's saying, maybe we should go to the cloud? We're not really sure. How do we start? Where do we go?
It is good to have a partner along that cloud migration journey. There are a lot of pitfalls that can occur. The news is full of security issues of poorly managed cloud migrations that are wide open to the world or similar. That you want to lay out your network plan to start with.
what your instances look like. There's a lot of surprise costs that can come out of grass just because you planned a multi-availability zone network that has failover capabilities. Maybe you didn't plan on the amount of data you were transferring between zones.
No, sounds like a company in North America that does everything north of the Mexican border through Canada. Would they look for just availability zones in the US, or would they actually want something out of their general geographic area just in case?
I don't think there's a great value in that. I would imagine that, say, East and West or East and Central or something like that might be sufficient in most of those situations. I don't see a great value in just establishing a presence in Asia or in Europe for the sake of doing so.
Okay. And if you are in Asia and Europe and North America, South America and all that, you really want things spread around, which gets very difficult to manage.
Yeah, it really does. But you want to execute that workload as close to your customer base as possible in most cases. So, and in the case of European data, you might not be able to. You may have to stay there for GDPR regulations.
Cool. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, it was great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, and thanks for being at Percona Live.